Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a pretty high altitude trip, looking into one of the most, well, contentious topics out there, unidentified aerial phenomena or UAPs. But look, we're not here for shaky phone videos. Our sources today, they're official high-level documents. We're focusing mainly on the French Cometa report, really influential stuff, often kind of suppressed.
That's right. And our mission here is to take you right into the findings from military folks, civilian specialists.
Right.
Basically the top brass in French defense and science.
Yeah, we want to move past just speculation.
Exactly. We're digging into those high credibility cases. Where you have physical evidence, radar data, testimonies from highly trained witnesses, all pointing the same way.
Okay, so the centerpiece, this Cometa report, it sounds pretty significant for anyone listening who hasn't heard of it. What exactly was this committee, and why should we take their findings seriously?
Right. Well, Cometa stands for Comité d'études approfondies. It was basically a deep dive study published back in 1999, and it was put together by this independent group of high-ranking military officers, engineers, researchers.
High-ranking?
Yeah, and critically, a lot of these people were linked to France's Institute for Advanced National Defense Studies, the IHDN.
Okay, so definitely not a fringe group. These are people connected right into the national defense structure.
Absolutely. And the committee, which was formally coordinated by General Bernard Norlain, they were really clear about their purpose. It wasn't just academic curiosity. They wanted to tackle concrete problems that call for a response in terms of action. They were looking at it like a potential strategic issue.
A threat assessment, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah.
And the tone seems pretty direct right from the start. General Denis Letty's introduction, it says the sheer amount of good documented sightings by credible people. It forces us to consider from now on all of the hypotheses regarding the origin of these things. So they're basically saying, look, the facts are leading us somewhere and we have to follow, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
And where they ended up, well, that's what really caused waves at the time. Cometa's main conclusion, after looking at the toughest, most baffling cases, it was incredibly blunt.
Okay.
They said the single hypothesis that sufficiently takes into account the facts is extraterrestrial visitors.
Hold on. A French defense committee with ties to the military looks at the data and says the most likely explanation for these impossible maneuvers, the EM interference, is ETs. Wow. That's a huge statement.
It is massive. And they actually acknowledged, that this view gets discredited by a certain elite, but they argued it was the only idea that really fit all the physical evidence and the flight patterns they were seeing.
Okay, but to get to that kind of conclusion, the data must have been solid, right? Tell us about how the French actually track and categorize these things. They used that system, didn't they?
They did, yeah. They relied heavily on the system set up by GPAN, later CEPRA, that's France's official UAP research group, operating under their space agency, CNES.
Right.
It's quite a rigorous system. It sorts sightings into categories. Category A, definitely identified, a plane, a meteor, whatever.
Good.
Categories B and C are basically unknowns, but because the data is poor or incomplete. But the kicker, the category that really pushed Cometa towards their conclusion is Category D UAPD. The genuinely unexplained stuff.
And they had a lot of data to work with, didn't they? The Gendarmerie Nationale, that's like their military police.
Yeah, exactly.
They collected something like 3,000 reports just since 1974. That's an incredible amount. It lets you study things that might otherwise just get dismissed.
Absolutely. And that volume lets you see patterns, make comparisons. For instance, the report points out that in France, the number of Category G cases, the really unexplained ones, reported specifically by pilots or air traffic controllers, since 51 is really low. Like only 3 or 4.
Huh. Only 3 or 4.
Yeah, which is really different from what you see mentioned in U.S. literature. There, they talk about over 500 unexplained reports from pilots and controllers.
Wow. So that suggests what? A difference in reporting? Or maybe just what the U.S. military tends to encounter more often?
Could be either or both. It's a fascinating contrast anyway.
Okay, let's talk about the cases that just seem to break the laws of physics. Because when you read the details of these UAPD sightings, especially the military ones, that's where it stops feeling like just theory and starts feeling, well, kind of alarming. What were some standout incidents?
Well, the Tehran incident from 1976 is a really powerful example. And this wasn't just some rumor. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, confirmed it. They even called it a classic case.
Okay, what happened?
An Iranian F-4 jet was sent up to intercept an object. As the jet got close, about 45 kilometers away, bam, its flight instruments just died. All communications, too, radio, intercom, everything, went completely silent.
Wait, the F-4 jet, a military interceptor, was basically neutralized just by getting close. If something can shut down an F-4 from 45 kilometers, isn't that immediately a massive security concern no matter what it is?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? And the physics involved were even stranger. The radar return from the UFO was huge, apparently similar to the echo you'd get from the moon, but its movements showed what they called astounding maneuverability.
Astounding maneuverability.
And this points to the core issue Cometa kept coming back to. These objects seem to have completely lack inertia. The report basically says somehow they had overcome gravity.
Right, so it's not just about going fast. It's about instantaneous stops, right-angle turns, stuff that would just liquefy a pilot.
Exactly. There was another case, a Mirage Thefy encounter in France. The date isn't specified, but the pilot, they just call him P, was pulling a really hard high G turn, like 3 or 4 Gs, just trying to keep eyes on this thing. Assailant A1. And despite P pushing his aircraft to the limit, A1 just instantly pops up behind him, mirrors his turn perfectly, and then zooms off. No visible propulsion. Then, about 45 seconds later, another identical glowing object appears.
It sounds like something out of a movie, but this is coming from trained military pilots.
It is, and Cometa uses this whole lack of inertia thing to kind of justify looking into really advanced theoretical physics. They link these impossible maneuvers, which you also see in older cases like the US RB-47 incident in 1957, to concepts we're only just starting to think about. They even mention active stealth technologies currently in development and even in operation.
So they're suggesting that whatever this is, whether it's ours, theirs, someone else's, the propulsion has to be something completely outside our normal understanding.
That's the implication, yeah. If you can ignore inertia and gravity, you need some kind of massive, non-conventional power source. The report mentions things like magnetohydrodynamics, MHD, nuclear propulsion, even antimatter way down the line. We're not talking better rockets, we're talking physics manipulation.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. From things flying around impossibly to physical traces left behind. The report dives into cases where these UAPD objects supposedly landed or interacted with the ground, right? Like Trans-en-Provence in '81.
Yes, Trans-en-Provence. That one's crucial because Disinformation handled the investigation, and it was incredibly thorough. A witness saw this sort of circular metallic double saucer thing land silently, then take off again. Investigators found clear marks on the ground and, importantly, effects on the plants.
Effects on the plants? What kind of effects?
Well, they tested the wild alfalfa that was growing right where it landed. The analysis showed really significant changes, significant variations in concentration of chlorophyll and amino acids. The scientists concluded it was consistent with being hit by an extremely powerful electrical field.
How powerful are we talking?
The report estimates it might have far exceeded 200 kilovolts per meter.
200 kilovolts per meter. I mean, what does that translate to? Is that like enough to cook the grass?
Well, put it this way. 200 kilometers is maybe 100 times stronger than the electric field you'd find right next to high-voltage power lines. So, yeah, it wasn't trivial. It was a localized blast of energy that clearly changed the vegetation biologically. It's hard physical evidence of something unusual happening right there.
And that theme, the electrical interference, it pops up again and again, doesn't it? It wasn't just the Tehran F4. There are stories of car engines dying, people being temporarily paralyzed, like the Maurice Mass case, and even power grids going down.
The San Carlos de Bariloche incident in '95 is a pretty dramatic example. An object was sighted near the airport. At the same time, the whole town just plunged into darkness, a major power outage. And this happened right as a Boeing 727 was being warned about the object nearby. It really points to some kind of strong electromagnetic interaction.
The sources also mention the huge flap in France back in 1954. Just the sheer number of reports must have overwhelmed the authorities.
Oh, absolutely. It was a deluge. Something like 2,425 cases filed in France alone during that period. You had these incredible ground-level encounters, like Farmer H. Antoine Mouzon seeing a silent figure in a helmet next to a cigar-shaped craft that just lifted straight up.
Wow.
The authorities were really stuck, you know. Do you believe these, frankly, unbelievable stories, or do you try to explain everything away psychologically, which often didn't fit the facts?
But it's important to stress, Cometa wasn't just accepting every wild story, right? They were using that Japan SEPRA filtering system.
Definitely. The report is quite careful to balance the really compelling, coherent cases against the noise. They knew many 1954 reports were probably misidentifications, meteors, weird clouds, planes, even tractor headlights sometimes.
Right.
And they mentioned known hoaxes, too, like a case in Spain, Almaceda, to show they're aware of that possibility.
Right.
Their focus stayed squarely on those few high-quality UAPD cases that just couldn't be explained away after all the filtering.
Okay, so this rigorous approach, filtering out the noise, it brings us right to the whole issue of secrecy, especially the U.S. stance, historically, with things like Project Blue Book, the Condon Report, basically saying nothing to see here. Why, according to Cometta's analysis, would the U.S. government maintain such a strong, long-lasting policy of denial?
Well, Cometa floated a couple of main strategic reasons for the secrecy, particularly from the U.S. perspective. First, the technological angle, gaining an edge. If, hypothetically, the U.S. had recovered debris, say, from Roswell in '47, and was trying to reverse engineer it, keeping that secret during the Cold War would be absolutely critical for military advantage.
Right, weaponizing whatever they found.
Potentially, yes. The second major reason they proposed was more about societal stability, basically avoiding mass panic, preventing a complete loss of faith in leaders, maybe stopping a massive, destabilizing swing towards religious extremism or end-of-the-world beliefs. The fear was that the truth would just shatter society.
And there are actual mechanisms to enforce that silence, aren't there? The report mentions JNAP 146.
Yes, GNAP 146. A military regulation, possibly still active, that apparently treats unauthorized disclosure of certain types of sightings as espionage. If you threaten military personnel with treason charges for talking, well, that guarantees silence, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's chilling.
But beyond the political and military reasons, Cometa also identified a deeper, almost philosophical barrier, especially for the scientific community. It's a kind of profound reluctance
Reluctance to what?
to face the possibility of a civilization that's, more advanced by several centuries, maybe even millennia. Admitting that possibility fundamentally undermines what they call anthropocentric humanism, this deep-seated idea that humans are in control, that we're the pinnacle of development.
It's the whole intellectual framework potentially collapsing, right? Realizing our cutting-edge science might be, as the report puts it, literally infantile compared to what's already out there.
Exactly. And that realization, Cometa argued, is a huge psychological threat. It can be demobilizing. If you suddenly grasp that your whole scientific understanding is like kindergarten compared to reality, it could paralyze progress out of a sense of sheer inadequacy.
So, given all this, the physical evidence, the impossible flight, the global secrecy, the philosophical implications, what did the Cometa authors actually suggest we do about it? What was their recommendation?
Their proposed response was pretty direct. They called for cosmic vigilance. They wanted high-level government units set up specifically to promote objective research into UAPs. And crucially, they pushed hard for international cooperation.
Cooperation, okay.
They basically argued that if the U.S. just stuck to its denial policy, it would poison relationships between allies. They suggested France should maybe take the lead, push for some kind of European coordinating body so that, as they put it, Europe is no longer blind, dumb, and paralyzed on the issue.
It really sounds like the biggest hurdle isn't so much if these things are real anymore, given the radar, the traces, but dealing with the fallout, the geopolitical and philosophical mess of actually admitting it.
I think that's a fair summary. We have credible reports, solid documentation, suggesting technologies way beyond us, especially when it comes to gravity and inertia. The facts seem to demand action, just like Cometa said, but the default reaction from institutions has often been denial, largely driven by fear of the unknown and the threat it poses to established ways of thinking.
Okay, so let's leave you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on, pulled straight from the report's strategic thinking section. If ET civilizations could be millions of years ahead of us, if our science is literally infantile compared to what might already be in our skies, what does that actually mean for strategy? The Cometa report actually asks us to consider scenarios where extraterrestrials might try to impose their will on the states of the Earth. Forget military defense for a second. What strategies should we prioritize, focusing just on the sheer shock of that realization if the truth suddenly became undeniable tomorrow? Something to ponder next time you're looking up at the night sky.